What is up, Bench Mob NBA? How's it going, everyone? We got a special guest on today to talk, NBA draft and a lot of other things. Shouts out Dan, who tagged our Twitter under a tweet from Matt Babcock saying he has a lot of free time because he canceled his travels to a couple Big Ten, and I forgot the other one. But Matt, how's it going, man?
Hey, it's going well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for being on. So, when did you decide to cancel your trips? Are there other things that you didn't do? It's kind of like I feel like in the last 4 or 5 days, the whole coronavirus thing has blown up in a way where now Thursday there's going to be no fans at the Golden State Warriors game.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a crazy time, for sports and just all of us in general.
hmm
And I was set to leave for New York yesterday morning. I was going to go to 3 days at the Big East tournament, and then 2 days at the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis, and really hadn't slowed down my day to day life with the coronavirus stuff, and then. Monday afternoon, my dad called. My dad works for the Milwaukee Bucks. He was set to scout the
hmm
Big East tournament, and it just seemed like everything was escalating. We started getting wind that a number of teams were pulling their scouts off the road, and we just got a little nervous. I don't know, just the unknown is such a scary thing, and decided to cancel the trip and not risk it, even though we knew we were being pretty conservative. And it just seems like it's all even escalating more and more each day, and yeah, just crazy time.
100%. Yeah, for me, like I don't have any travel, but even like going to the gym is now a question. I'm doing like exercise at home, and like I don't know if I should go hoop. I'm being conservative too, but it's just kind of the state that we're all in. Hopefully, it all blows over, and that's definitely not the topic that we're gonna discuss right now for the next half hour, 45 minutes. We're gonna talk a little bit or a lot of it about college basketball, some prospects, some teams. The tournament's about to start in a week or two. And I personally, this is generally the time where I start my college scouting and understanding who the players are, who the teams are, and doing all my research. But I haven't really started that yet. And this was an impromptu podcast that we scheduled, so I'm really excited to kind of pick your brain about what you've been seeing a lot of this past, couple months, what you had your eye on in the beginning of the season that changed. So a lot of different topics. But before I do anything, I just want to toss it over to you. Like when you're watching college basketball, like what has been sticking out to you from a team point, from a prospect point? I just want to kick it off with wherever you want to go.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, it's funny that you say you start your scouting right now, and
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just finishing up.
That's
We
funny.
and it's, it's funny is next, and we'll see what goes on with travel and in these different sporting events being open or not. But in April it's a really busy month. Right now I'm scheduled to go to a bunch of high school All-American camps and
hmm
tournaments. I'm going to the Hoop Summit, McDonald's All-American Game, Jordan Brand Classic, Allen Iverson Classic, and the purpose of going is to get a head start for next year's draft. So we
100%.
we really start early, and um, yeah, so spent all year scouting these guys, and then I really hit it hard in the beginning of the season when there's a lot of double headers and tournaments. I went to Maui this year, which was great, and
That's awesome.
we were able to cover a lot of ground at that point. And right now it's sort of we pick and choose where we kind of feel vulnerable as far as knowing certain guys. And I was really looking forward to go to the Big East because there's a number of players that we have projected as like late first or second round picks that I want to get another look at. And so a little frustrating, not being able to go there because it's just I really value scouting guys in person. I think get a much better grip. But it is what it is. But
Yeah. Well, before we move on, I did want to pull from kind of a couple of bits that you said there. What I love that you're going into like the process and when you start looking at guys and you are almost finished with this year's scouting, like almost now. It's not finished, obviously, but I'm curious like how you got into focusing more on college and prospects instead of the NBA? Did it kind of transition from the NBA to college, or was it always college? I'm just very curious about like because there's splits. I'm definitely more of an NBA guy, and the only reason I watch college is to understand who's going to be good at the NBA. And I know there's a lot of people that watch college and then understands why players might be becoming good in the NBA because they saw so much of them in college. So that kind of mix in basketball watching is always interesting to me. So I just want to get your take on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for me personally, I guess just kind of giving you a little bit of my background of
Mm-hmm.
how I kind of got into doing this. So I was born into a basketball family.
Mm-hmm.
My dad and my two uncles have all worked in the NBA for a long time. My oldest uncle started in like the late '70s. So, you know, an NBA kid growing up. You know, my with my family scouting, working as front office executives, you know, I was exposed to that side of things. And then when I finished school, I had planned on either being a coach or you know, kind of following my dad's footsteps of you know getting into scouting. And I was offered some jobs working for sports agencies, and I kind of fell into that world unplanned. Did that for 11 years, and 2 years ago, I decided to get back closer to my roots and do something a little bit more, you know, directly basketball related. And so I got out of the agency business, and I started scouting for an NBA scouting service called Marty Blake and Associates.
Mm-hmm.
It was originally put together by the NBA years ago in the '80s, um, and you know I loved it. Knew I wanted to cover the draft, wanted to be an NBA scout, or you know, work in the media covering the draft, and just that was definitely a passion of mine. Is a passion of mine. And during that time, I got approached by Sports Illustrated to write a series of stories about the pre-draft process from an agent's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So now all of a sudden, you know, I'm scouting, I'm doing some media. It's all kind of like evolving organically, and you know, so I did that for a while and really enjoyed it, and decided to create my own entity of Babcock Hoops and do all those things under one umbrella. And so that's kind of how I've got into this point of covering the draft for you know my company Babcock Hoops.
And for those that don't know what Babcock Hoops is, sorry, um, it's obviously drafting and all that, but want to give them a little bit of a description of what you guys are up to there.
Yeah, sure. So it's a pretty simple website. We do you know we have I put together a staff. Last year initially it was all former NBA scouts, guys that just like in between jobs, and the idea was, hey, let's you know let's create an infrastructure where guys that are in between jobs but have a lot of you know experience working in the NBA can evaluate the draft, kind of stay in the mix, and you know we could share knowledge and you know that way you know I could have a much more of like a leg up as far as like knowing which players are good and which players I need to be watching and just having you know another level of insight compared to the rest of the media world. And so what we've done is, you know, our primary focus is the NBA draft. We kind of like to look at it as like we're simulating as if we were working for an NBA team.
That's
And we
perfect.
just, you know, yeah, and we do a bunch of articles. We have a mock draft, and then we also do, you know, different stories, just you know, about our experience, our backgrounds, or just you know, the NBA and basketball in general.
Yeah, I mean, simulating the front office and NBA front offices is exactly what I try to do here. So it's good that you kind of have that same mindset there. So let's mix those two together a little bit for the next half an hour because I'm curious who has been or a number of players. Maybe there's only one, maybe there's three or four. But you mentioned you go to the Hoop Summit and all these different camps earlier on before the college season actually begins. So, are there any players that were standouts last year when you started that process and then just have consistently stayed as standouts until today?
Let me see here. Well, I mean, you know, this isn't exactly, you know, answering your question, but it's sort of the same
Mm-hmm.
ideas. You know, I got a great grip on James Wiseman, you know, before he
Mm-hmm.
even stepped foot on, you know, at Memphis. And I'm glad I did, you know, because he only played 3 games this year, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, and I think that's really where there's a lot of value of starting early because you just don't know, you know, what's going to happen. I mean, then, you know, you got guys like LaMelo Ball and RJ Hampton that went to Australia. So, I mean, I was able to see them you know, before the season started. I didn't need to go to Australia because I saw them a bunch already. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though I would have liked to, and all the NBA teams did, I didn't want to, I didn't want to pick up that bill.
Yeah, no, I don't
So the
blame you. I don't blame you.
trip to Australia is not the easiest one. So, but yeah. Anyway, we try and get a head start on guys. You know, and every single player sort of has a different story. I mean, it's interesting. You know, I was intrigued by Obi Toppin last year, but you know, he put his name in the draft, didn't get invited to the combine, and he's just, you know, I saw him early on at Maui. You know, spent 3 4 days watching him, and man, he's just been on fire this year. It's been a lot of fun to watch him.
Well, All right, let's get into a couple of those players then in a little bit more detail. Because I mean, I have Babcock hoops up on my screen right now. James Weisman, number one, projected at least in the mock draft. Do you see that changing? Is he kind of like a tier above the Anthony Edwards or Obi Toppin? He's a center too, so like, how does that dynamic fit into the current NBA? I'm just curious, like a little bit more detail. What should I keep my eye on when I start, looking at James Wiseman tape?
Well, I think one thing that's important to point out with our mock draft is just sort of how we put it together. This isn't a big board; it's not rankings.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally break down each team and try and put myself in the shoes of each general manager and make a pick. And so with this year's draft specifically, there's not a clear cut number one guy. It's not like a year like how it was with like Tim Duncan or LeBron James or even last year with Zion. I think there's good players. But there's a lot of parity. I've got 7 guys in the first tier that I think there's a good chance that they could be the first 7 selected just because of them being slightly ahead of the group behind them. But with the first few picks, I mean Golden State, they're in an interesting situation because they've got their core star unit coming back next year, and so they. I would think they're going to want somebody that can fit in next year to help them win and kind of capitalize on having these all-star, Hall of Fame level guys, so they can win some more championships, but also have a building block moving forward. And Wiseman seems like a guy that they can plug in at the 5, to sort of be a rim runner, rim protection, rebounder, help them win next year, but also be a long-term piece moving forward. And so, depending on how the draft lottery goes, I think the early picks can really shake things up.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of stock in this upcoming draft because of the Chicago Bulls being not very good, and I'm a big Bulls guy, so we'll see where they land. I'm not sure that, like I said, if the Bulls end up getting that number one pick, I feel like this mock draft might look a lot different because they already got Lowry and Wendell and all that sort of situation. But I'm just gonna kind of walk down right now and maybe. Listeners, take this with a grain of salt. He might be number 2 on this mock draft, but might fit in better on another team. But Anthony Edwards, to the Cavs you have right now, what are some of the things that stuck out with Anthony Edwards? And he wasn't one of the guys that you mentioned in terms of like starting in the Hoop Summit and catching your eye and coming all the way here. Did he have ups and downs? Like what is he kind of like?
Well, with Edwards, I did not see him before the season started.
Okay.
For whatever reason, I can't remember the reason, but he didn't go to any of those events last spring. He did. A lot of people got to know him through the EYBL, which I didn't cover last year. So my first time seeing him live was in Maui, and it was really I actually wrote an article about this, and it was a pretty interesting trip because he really struggled. The first the first game he was horrible. And looked really out of place. I mean, I was thinking to myself, hey, I'm gonna have to move him back on the mock draft. And then, the second game they played against Michigan State, which at the time they were one of the top-rated teams. First half he was bad again. I'm just again thinking, is this guy overhyped? I don't know if this guy's ready. And the second half he had 33 points or something like that, and it was one of the most incredible performances I'd ever seen. And I've seen him several times since then. And he's had a very up and down year. I mean, very typical freshman type campaign. But he's got so much upside. And as far as raw talent goes, I think he's probably got the most of anybody in this draft. But he's not a finished product. So that with a guy like that, there is some risk because even though I think it's going to click and he's going to develop properly, that's still an if, and the player's got to do it. And so, I mean, as far as him needing some more polish and all that is, his shot selection's not very great. And I don't think his decision making is spot on all the time. Defensively, he's a little bit behind, and so, he's got some things he needs to address. But with our mock draft now, I mean, Cleveland, they've drafted guards the last 2 years. And even though this, with Edwards, he's more of a shooting guard than a point guard, he doesn't fit their roster perfectly. But I just think the upside, was too high to pass up. And there's a number of picks like that. I mean, your Chicago Bulls are an interesting team as well because they've got a lot of young pieces, and I think they could go in a number of different directions. And I have them taking R.J. Hampton, who I think is like Edwards, is a little bit of a project, but he's got some raw talent. He is so athletic. And, with the Bulls, and I'm curious of your opinion, It doesn't seem like any of their guys are their long-term answer at point guard. I mean, I know Kobe White has had an interesting year, but I see him more as a combo guard rather than a primary point guard. And I see RJ Hampton long-term being a lead guy. So I don't know. So I have them taking the guard right now, but we'll see.
For me, I mean, just to answer that question, I think the only reason why we're very set on Kobe as a full combo right now, and not weird, just like in general, I feel like that's the consensus opinion about Kobe. For me, I think I've seen enough flashes of his playmaking to where I think if that was his focus, he could be the long term answer. I think his explosiveness, the speed, and then combined with the playmaking that I think he does have inside him, is, lends me toward the Bulls really looking for more of a wing, because they don't really have that long term answer at the wing. I don't know if Zach LaVine is going to be there fully long term. He's signed for the next 3 years, but I would go for more of a defensive, like versatile wing
Sure.
type guy. And I mean, just by glancing at height and position, like Obi Toppin or Denny Avdija. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, but like,
Avdija, yeah.
are those that type of player? Because for me, and I'm rambling a little bit, but I want to give some context. For me, I rank players in like levels. Like for me, the number one player every team needs in order to succeed, in my opinion, is an all-around wing type of guy. Can create shots, can not kind of knock down shots at a respectable rate, can play defense. Next is like your shooting playmaker, so you can spread the floor but also make the right pass if needed, and obviously there are levels to that too, if you can defend or not, and what have you. And then the third is kind of like a rim protecting but switchable big, and then the icing on top of that is if they can also shoot, so like your Porzingis or Jaren Jackson or stuff like that, or Bam can make plays so he makes up for the lack of shooting, whatever. So those are like my top 3 level guys that I want on my team, and then after that is just all role players filling in and lower level types of those players off the bench. So for me, I want that like number one type guy. Obviously everyone does, but the Bulls don't even have a proxy for that yet. So I'm just curious, is there a proxy for that all around wing that I'm kind of talking about here?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to depend on where the Bulls are picking. I mean, I think they go. I mean, just looking at their depth chart. I mean, sort of like not even necessarily their depth chart today, but sort of like envisioning the pieces that they have that are going to be part of their core in the next couple of years. I think they could do a point guard. I mean, if LaMelo Ball's on the board, I could see them. I could see them going in that direction and having it be sort of a three-headed monster where you got LaMelo and Levine being the starters, with Kobe playing minutes at both spots, backing him up, where he's like the sixth man, but he's playing starters type minutes.
Yep.
I could see something like that working. And it's sort of like that's sort of like my vision with RJ Hampton. Even though I don't think RJ's ready to be a full-time point guard yet, that's his upside. And so it's sort of a draft pick of like, okay, let's develop him. Let's see what he'll be in the next couple, 2-3 years. And again, same idea of like having a three-headed monster of the guards where they kind of, split the minutes. But I agree. They also could go with a wing. I just have the wings that are in that range a little bit behind that first group. But I mean, if they're in a situation to take the kid Denny Abdia, that would be a great pick for them.
So what are his strengths?
So he's like a 6'9" point forward. He's got a little bit. This isn't a perfect comparison, but he's got a little bit of Ben Simmons in him. He's got size, playmaking ability. I don't think he'll ever play point guard like Ben does, but he's got. He reminds me of him slightly. And then,
well, it's his defense. Like, what's his defense like?
He's got a high basketball IQ.
Okay.
And I think he'll be fine there. He's a better shooter than Ben Simmons. I'm not sure he's quite as good. He's not quite as big or quite as athletic, but he's, again, he's just kind of in the same mold of being, 6'9", point forward type. So he'd be good. I think Isaac Okoro from Auburn could be an option. Aaron Nesmith. And these guys are wings. Okoro is like a 6'6", bulky, like big time athlete, defends everybody, really smart. The issue with him is just, he doesn't have a whole lot of creativity offensively. His shooting is just okay. But I mean, what he does well, he does really well. And just physically, he's a pretty intriguing prospect. On the flip side, that Aaron Nesmith, who's been injured for a little while. He had surgery on his foot, but he's supposed to come back in full strength by April. He 6'6", shooter scorer. I mean, this guy just strokes the heck out of it. And I mean, the way the game's played now, especially, you kind of plug a guy like that into pretty much any system. If a guy can hit shots and score, I mean, that's that shooting's coming on a premium.
So yeah, I'm just picking and choosing a little bit of what I'm liking and not disliking, but just from what I'm hearing from you, Denny Avdija really stands out. High basketball IQ, maybe not the best shooter, but is down to take the shots at least and maybe can improve there. High basketball IQ means he can maybe make the plays and get better as a ball handler as he goes on. He has the length. So for me, it's just, is he a good defender on ball? And then I think that toolkit that you described is exactly what, I'd be looking for if I were kind of really any team looking for like that guy that maybe I don't know. We'll see how he develops. I haven't done any scouting. I'm just taking bits and pieces here.
Sure.
I am very interested in what you think about Lamelo though in a little bit more detail, just because I feel like he's the guy I watched the most film of so far. Very minimal at that, but it seems like he has the vision, he has the courage to take a lot of shots, even though he might not be super efficient yet. I feel like that's something that can improve. Is there anything? Is there any glaring weakness that makes it like hard for you to put him even higher? Because it seems like he has the whole package.
Well, he's a very intriguing prospect. He's got
Hmm.
great size. I mean, he's got the ball on his string. I mean, his handles are tight, and just the natural playmaking ability and create creativity. I think he's on another level. I mean, he's going to be a guy if a team could plug in a point guard. I mean, he's going to be on the board for every pick. So I mean, he could go as high as one. I think like I mentioned before, there is a lot of parity in this first
Yeah.
group. And so, I mean, I think the number of these guys can go in those first handful of picks. And, there are some concerns with LaMelo. Physically, he's pretty weak, and he's not overly athletic. I think he's one of these guys that his length and his skill level are so high. He's able to shake you and be crafty. But he's not blown by. He's not a high flyer. He just uses his length and skill level. And then uh, probably the biggest concern, maybe even more so than the physical limitations, is it's just sort of his maturity as a player. I mean, he plays pretty fancy. He
Yeah.
tries to take a lot of hard shots and make tough plays. I'd like to see him find a better balance of making the game a little simpler for himself, and I think that will really help his shooting percentages. I mean, his mechanics aren't perfect. They're not broken though, and I think it's more of him shooting at low percentages, more of the shots he's taken rather than shooting mechanics.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Sorry. A lot of the time, I'd rather need to tone down the flashiness than not have it in me at all. I guess So hopefully that's the case where he can kind of control that back and wherever he lands. I mean, if he right now you have him slated at the Knicks, so I don't know if that's the best situation to. Anyway, let's talk about I don't know, any sleepers, any like late, like who's that guy that you're really, I don't know, that you really like that might fall further than we think, that will be an actual impact player. There's always guys at post pick 15 that should have gone top 10 or even top 5 in certain cases. Is there any guys like that you have your eye on? Is it too early to even talk about that? But I'm just curious.
I don't know. I mean, it's a tough question just because we've been doing this day in day out for so
Of
long that
course.
none of these guys are sleepers to us. So it's kind of like
That's true.
who's a sleeper for you?
Yeah, yeah.
And, um,
If
but
they were
I think they're
sleepers, you wouldn't have your own rankings in the way you made it.
right,
Yeah. So,
right. So there are a couple guys that I'm not quite as high on
mhm,
as I think the general public and media are. And the two names that always I always get a lot of heat for is Cole Anthony and Tyrese Maxey.
mhm.
And I'm just it's not like I necessarily dislike either player. I'm just not quite. I don't evaluate my evaluation of them is not quite as high as most of the media. I guess you could say.
Why not?
Well, I think the translation to the NBA game. There's some concerns. I mean, with Cole, I think a big part of it with Cole is he was hyped up out of high school so much, and then his first few games at Carolina, he blew up, and I think he's just riding a wave of hype, and he's not a bad player, but he for the way he plays. I mean, he is a tunnel vision scorer. I don't think he's a great point guard. I have some concerns with his just overall personality and presence as a teammate.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, I think he'll be, an okay NBA player. I just, if you're drafting him thinking he's going to be your primetime point guard, I don't know. I have some concerns there. With Maxi, it's a different conversation with him. I mean, the ultimate character kid, real gutsy. The type of personality you certainly want in your locker room and on your team. The basketball evaluation with him is a little bit more of the concern. At the Hoop Summit that I told you I was at last year, he got measured at 6'1" without shoes. And I really see him as strictly as a shooting guard. I don't
Mhm.
think he can play much point, and he's not overly quick. He's pretty crafty and he's aggressive, which makes up for it a little bit. And he's got a long wingspan, but still, we're talking about a 6'1" shooting guard that's not overly quick and hasn't shot the ball that well. And so, I mean, some people are talking about him as a top 10 pick, and I just don't see it. I think he's a good player. I think I see him more as a late first, early second round guy. And, naturally there's a discrepancy between, his rankings and, in mock draft spots, other media outlets than with ours.
Are there any other players that obviously, I mean, you might not have all the access or you might not know them personally, but just things that stick out from what you read and see and do your own scouting? But in terms of like mindset, you know how you said Maxi is the ideal guy that you want in your locker room. Are there any other guys that stand out in that regard?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, we do have a lot of access to
Yeah.
intel, and we've got a staff of full of former NBA scouts,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so and I run a consulting business behind the scenes.
for sure.
So I mean, we are having a lot of conversations with agents, players, parents, and so I mean, I do think that is an advantage we have
Hmm.
evaluating the draft. Is I think we've got a lot of information that most people don't. Again, there's nobody that's standing out right off the top of my head that hey he's going to be drafted high just because of his character. I'm actually looking at my mock draft now. Oh, here's one. Zeke Nagi from Arizona. I've done a lot of homework on him, and I think I have him higher than a lot of people do.
Hmm.
We have him at 12, and I really like him, on the court. But he's got a great background check and intelligent and personable and hard worker. And, sort of what I was saying about Tyrese Maxey. He's the kind of guy you want on your team, and he's probably going to be able to maximize his potential. That's a guy that stands out for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's kind of the number one thing that I value in players is how committed are they to getting better and like why are they playing the game and just all those intangibles I think do make the difference in a lot of things. So I always like to ask that question, but a couple other things to before we wrap up. I do want your opinion on the fact that, or at least the news or rumors or whatever, that this draft class is not as deep or it's not as we know it's not as top heavy. At least that's what you mentioned. There's no like Zion or Anthony Davis or whatever. But what's the depth of the draft looking like to you?
I actually think it's pretty good.
Okay,
I
for sure.
like this draft. I mean, I think there's a number of good players in it. I just think there's a lot more parity. I think there's going to be a number of good role players.
Hmm.
I mean, I think a handful of these guys have the potential to be at like an all-star level. I mean, do we have any Hall of Famers in this class? I don't know. I mean, Anthony
That's on
Edwards.
mindset. That's on the
Yeah,
mindset anyway. Hall of Fame level guys.
yeah, I mean, Edwards has got crazy upside. I mean, we'll see how much he's able to maximize that. But there's going to be good players, and I think there's depth as far as finding good, productive players in this draft. It's just people are labeling it as hey, this is not as good. I think it's more if we're looking at it, we're comparing it to like the Kobe Bryant, Steve Nash, Ray Allen
Yeah, yeah.
draft. I mean, it's like is it like that? No, it's not. But I don't think this is the Anthony Bennett draft either.
So then I want to follow up with that because I have this high level theory, and I don't do all my draft scouting until later anyway. So a lot of people push back when I even mention this. So I'm just curious from someone that follows it. Is I feel like just looking at the NBA, there's so much more talent up and down every single roster for every single team, and then I think there's at least 3 to 5 solid role players, NBA role players that are right now playing in the G League. There's just more talent coming in, and for me, the idea that a draft this year or next year or in any upcoming year could be like one of the bottom 5 worst drafts in the past 15 to 20 years is doesn't make any logical sense to me. But again, that's me just high level, not actually going into the weeds in the college game saying this. So I'm curious what you think about that, theory that I have.
I don't know. I think with the draft, it's pretty interesting because we'll have one prospect, and I think a big part of them having a successful career is them getting in the right situation and having a team that believes in them and
Mm-hmm.
giving them a role that allows them to thrive. And so it's just, I mean, to evaluate or project, what this class is going to do, it's challenging, because there's a lot of variables involved.
For sure. Any team based things like what teams should we be looking out for the tournament upcoming?
Well, I think that sort of the team I'm going to be rooting for, Dayton. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
a mid major, with a top player like Obi Toppin, and they're really exciting, and it'd be fun to watch a team at that level, kind of carry the momentum that they have going into the tournament.
Any other final thoughts or words that you want to, give to the bench mob community here?
No, you tell me. What do you want to?
I mean, you
What
want
do
to
you want?
like? Is there? I see. I'm on your website, so there's like a subscribe thing. What do you get with that subscription? Anything else that you would like to plug within the Babcock Hoops, ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so if you subscribe, essentially you just get email notifications when we post new
Okay.
articles or update our mock draft. Yeah, not any kind of paid subscription or anything like that.
Hmm.
And yeah, just keep we'll keep pumping up the content as we get closer to the draft. And yeah, just follow us. You can follow me on Twitter at Matt Babcock 11, and then our company at Babcock Hoops.
Well, thank you so much, Matt, for hopping on. I definitely got a lot of different insights from you that I was trying to get, and hopefully our listeners did too. Make sure you go check out Babcock Hoops and check out the Bench Mob at the Bench Mob NBA on all your social platforms, and we'll talk to you next time. Peace.
Great, thank you.